Good afternoon, and welcome to members of the media and the people of Bermuda who may be watching or listening to this press conference. On Friday, the 3rd of November, Her Excellency the Governor presented the government's 2023 throne speech entitled Serving the People. This title is both the theme of this year's throne speech and a commitment that the government has and will continue to place the people of Bermuda at the center of the work that we undertake during this legislative year. This is not a new commitment, but a continuation of how we have carried out our service since returning to office, with the goal of making Bermuda a fairer and more equitable society. The work that we have done has led to impactful changes, such as the reduction of payroll tax for workers to the lowest level in 30 years, an increase in the stock of affordable housing, the Bermuda College being made accessible to all students, regardless of financial circumstances, and increased pensions and healthcare benefits for our seniors, and enhanced social protections for families. In the past year, we have continued this work through significant legislative changes, including further reductions in payroll taxes for 86% of workers and businesses, with small businesses receiving a cut of up to 43%, and the implementation of a minimum wage for the first time in Bermuda's history, with the expansion of the child care allowance to reach more families. In this year's budget, the government ended austerity, allocating funding for long-delayed capital projects to improve our infrastructure and providing the necessary financial support to ensure that government departments are adequately staffed to better deliver public services. This government has shown that we recognize that effective governing extends beyond changes to legislation and policy, and also lies successful implementation and efficient delivery of the services they cover that impact the lives of taxpayers. Therefore, as outlined in this year's throne speech, our focus will be on enhancing customer service experience through key touch points to reflect the high standards that the public rightly expects from their interactions with the government and accurately aligns with our reputation as a sophisticated jurisdiction. We will work to streamline regulations and embrace the use of technology to support our hard-working public officers who have too often needed to navigate antiquated systems to administer services. Further digitalization will assist in the invaluable work that they do daily and provide better services for the taxpayers of Bermuda. As we improve services to Bermuda's residents, our work to make Bermuda fairer for all will continue. And that will be the mission of the Ministry of Finance in this upcoming parliamentary year, which will demonstrate the difference between this government's approach and that of the opposition, who time and time again have demonstrated that they are unprepared to lead. This government will make clear that the financial inclusivity is paramount and that Bermudians deserve to have access to basic banking services, and no Bermudians should be victims to the experience of being unbanked. Imagine being a Bermudian unable to have a bank account or a credit or debit card. How would you travel? Book a flight, a car, a hotel? What about access to online services that we use right here in Bermuda, which require a credit card or a debit card? These particular things are not options in 2023. They are necessities for normal life. And to address this issue, we will legislate the requirement for licensed banks to have a duty to provide basic banking services to all residents, which is similar to provisions that have been made in many jurisdictions around the world. In addition, during this session, the government will introduce further regulations on excessive banking fees for banking services. These regulations will provide additional protections for Bermudians alongside the regulations for over-the-limit fees, which were passed into legislation last year and which will come into effect before the end of this year. Fairer banking and more robust regulation on fees will support our continued economic growth and open more opportunities for Bermudian workers, families, and businesses by ensuring their hard-earned money is not lost to disproportionate fees. It will also complement ongoing initiatives such as the Mortgage Guarantee Program, which has already approved 49 applicants, moving them closer to the dream of home ownership and supporting their aspirations through tangible support from the government of Bermuda. During this legislative year, and following extensive consultation with the public and industry stakeholders, the government will also introduce the corporate income tax bill, in line with our commitment to adhere to the Global Minimum Tax Agreement. The passage of this principal act will lay the groundwork for the introduction of qualified refundable tax credits. And these tax credits will promote investment from international companies that will fall within the scope of the new tax regime for vital projects that will enhance Bermuda's economy and Bermuda's infrastructure. As we uphold Bermuda's commitment to transparency and financial cooperation, we will put the necessary mechanisms in place to allow these historic changes to our tax system to benefit our island and our residents. Any additional revenues that arise from this new tax structure will be thoughtfully counterbalanced with the aim of reducing other existing taxes and customs duties. The Tax Reform Commission will review our current tax system and will provide recommendations to reduce the cost of living and the cost of doing business in Bermuda. During this legislative year, the government will also renew the vision of former Premier Jennifer Smith to strengthen our historical and cultural ties with the Caribbean region. As mentioned in the speech from the throne, in the year of the 20th anniversary of Bermuda's ascension to CARICOM as an associate member in 2003, over the past 2 decades, our associate membership has expanded opportunities for Bermuda not only in travel, but also in sports, arts, science, public health, business, and education through access to the renowned University of the West Indies. The government will conduct a broad consultation of the benefits of full CARICOM membership, and this is in line with other Caribbean overseas territories who have signaled their intention to join Montserrat as full members of CARICOM. However, to be clear, though those are matters related to the Ministry of Finance and also the Cabinet Office, our work does not stop there. Over the coming weeks, the public will hear from ministers on initiatives in their respective ministries outlined in this year's throne speech, such as the opening of new parish primary schools and the latest signature program for education services, hospitality, and tourism earmarked for Sands Middle School. We are committed to providing our public school students with an education system that prepares them for success and the jobs of tomorrow, and we will continue to deliver the schools and the programs to do this. You will also hear more about the foundational training we'll provide for students to enter the uniformed services through the Uniformed Services Cadet Program. You will hear how this government is empowering our young people in care by expanding the independent living program to those age 17 as they prepare to take on the responsibility of independent living, and how we will utilize existing government buildings to support our local artists and creatives. You will hear more about establishing the core healthcare services for the universal healthcare package that will be available to all residents as we continue to make quality healthcare accessible and affordable. You will hear how the government will lead by example as an employer to combat social inequalities and reform our recruitment process to support those with disabilities who can work with modifications to either their home or the office environment. Altogether, what the people of Bermuda will hear is that the government's commitment to continuing delivering on the promises it has made and our commitment to the effective and efficient public services that they deserve. Serving the people is at the heart of all that we do and will be central and will be the central theme that guides us through this legislative year and will reaffirm our overall goal of governance to rebuild Bermuda with Bermudians at heart. Thank you, and at this time, I will take questions.
All right, I'm going to start with Mr. Lindsay, TNN, Trevor.
Thank you. Good day, Premier. I haven't heard it mentioned. It was mentioned in the throne speech about the cyber attack. Is there any plans to have the each individual ministry on its individual servers, so it wouldn't cause such a major shutdown of majority of the government services?
So let's just hold on for 1 second. So the question is, on the specific revisions to what may come in the future and the revised network that is being planned, those aren't things that will, I guess, technically be disclosed to the public, certainly. But I think that there have certainly been lessons that have been learned. And in the matter that we are speaking about a parliamentary committee to look into and inquire on these particular matters, I think those are all things that technical officers will be able to share with parliamentarians who are investigating to try to understand more about our plans and to make any recommendations to the government that the parliament may see fit to do, which is what committees of parliament do all the time.
About the adoption of overseas, the process of adoption from overseas. What brought about this mention?
Sorry?
What brought about this mention for you to open that door for? Has there been many inquiries, or has there been many applications or challenges for individuals here in Bermuda, Bermudans, to adopt children from overseas?
So though I can't speak specifically to that, as those matters will follow the Minister of Social Development and Seniors, who will certainly be giving a press conference in the upcoming weeks. What I'll say is that press throne speeches represent the legislative agenda for the government for a particular year. They are put together with consultation with various ministers and also widely with the Progressive Labour Party caucus, identifying various policies and proposals which we believe are things that need to be advanced. Those are things which may come from our interactions with citizens while we canvass, or interactions that we may find processes that need to be streamlined and upgraded. So the Minister of Social Development and Seniors can speak to that more broadly. My view is to state that we are committed to serving the people, and from this is something that has come to us, and a change and modification that we will advance in the best interest of children. But the Minister of Social Development and Seniors at our press conference can happily delve into that particular issue.
CARICOM, looking to introduce ourselves to be a member of the CARICOM region. What's taking so long? 20 years is quite a long time.
Well, I mean, that's fair comment. It's not been something that has been on the front burner, but at the 20th anniversary of our ascension and the 50th anniversary of CARICOM, which I attended this year, there were a number of other Caribbean overseas territories, the United Kingdom, who had expressed their desire to go ahead and to advance for full membership. We think that there are certainly benefits that can come from that full membership of CARICOM, or deeper relationship and sharing experiences. And so that is something that we'll undertake in this consultative process. As other Caribbean overseas territories are looking to advance from associate members to full members along with Montserrat, it is something that the government will consider. I can't say that it was something that was particularly on the front burner, but I can say it was something that was discussed at the recent CARICOM Heads of Government Conference, and it's something that the government should consider, to review, to see whether or not it makes sense, and if it does, to advance that. I think that there are broad benefits in being a full member of CARICOM. I think that it is a signal of our deeper integration into the region, and though geographically we're distant, just as other countries in the South, such as Suriname and Guyana, are also geographically not really in the particular Caribbean basin themselves, I think that it could be helpful for us as we continue to advance and develop our institutions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lindsay, Mr. Deacon from the Royal Gazette, do you have some questions for?
I certainly do, yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Premier, how are you?
Not too bad, Jeremy.
Good, glad to hear. Trevor touched on a couple of areas that I wanted to explore as well. We'll go with the last one first for me, CARICOM. Why do you want full membership?
I don't know if it's a question of why do I want full membership. I think that it's important that as other jurisdictions are examining the relationship with CARICOM, I think that it is perfectly good for Bermuda to go ahead and to do the same. And so from that aspect, there are a number of institutions that we can participate in as an associate member, but there's also other institutions and discussions that we are unable to participate as associate member. There are certainly more benefits to being a full member than an associate member, and those are all things that we will discuss and explore throughout the consultative process.
What would Bermuda get out of it if it was a full member of CARICOM?
I think those are all things that we will certainly discuss through the consultation process, which will certainly happen. What I'm not trying to do is to get into, I know what the Royal Gazette wants to do, is to start to prejudge and to go through the thing. We engage in broad consultative processes. That is what we will do. And I'm certain there'll be plenty of opportunity for those questions and different things to be explored. But on the broad nature of it, at our 20-year anniversary and the 50th anniversary of CARICOM, with other overseas territories looking to make sure they can play a larger part within CARICOM, I think that it is appropriate for us to do so and to examine our relationship and to see whether it should change.
I certainly don't want to, I'm certainly not prejudging anything. I'm just trying to get an idea of the benefits for Bermuda and Bermudians from membership of CARICOM. Obviously, you'll be aware of what benefits other countries have. Could you give us a clue as to what those benefits might be? You mentioned that other countries have benefits from it. Just one or two examples that we might see.
So let's put it this way, as associate members of CARICOM, of course, that we get to attend meetings, we do not get to participate in a decision-making process, which may be a part of those things, and that is what full membership entails from that level. Certainly insofar as full membership, insofar as hosting various CARICOM meetings and others, which are reserved for full members. So there's a number of different aspects that can come from that, but those are all matters that we spell out inside of consultation, because I think it's important to note that, of course, there's a number of various CARICOM treaties that various countries may sign up to and may not sign up to as well. And those are all things that would have to be discussed with the UK government and our CARICOM partners.
As ever, you preempt my questions, Brendan. Have you spoken to government House about this?
Well, the governor had clearly had advanced side of the throne speech in those particular matters, but these are things that have been discussed with other overseas territories as well with the UK government regarding the path forward there. And I know that entrustment letters clearly were given to Montserrat to join as a full member, and other jurisdictions are considering those ones. Some of it received permission already to advance, but we will conduct our consultation process first to find out whether or not this is a direction that we wish to ultimately take,
Sure.
and we'll hopefully end up in that place.
So you've spoken to Government House about this?
It would require the permission of Government House through a letter of entrustment.
So I missed that.
It would require any
would require-
change in our relationship to CARICOM, just as the letter of entrustment was given for associate membership, would be required for full membership in CARICOM.
Can you give us an idea? You talk about consultation. Can you give us an idea of how long this might take? What are the steps Bermuda has to go through to get full membership?
I think those will all be things that will be outlined in the consultation process. The throne speech is something that is a high-level document. And I think that those things we've seen, the timeline will be during this parliamentary year.
So we've got an idea when the timeline might be?
This parliamentary year.
Trevor also mentioned the cyber attack. You said in the throne speech that the legislature will be invited to strike a joint select committee. Why is a joint select committee the best instrument to investigate the cyber attack?
I think that our members of parliament who are supposed to scrutinize the work of the executive are perfectly capable and able to go ahead and to engage in this particular work. We have backbenchers that our parliamentary committees have not particularly been very active. Those are matters that are with the legislature, not necessarily with the executive, but I think will present them an ideal opportunity to go ahead and to become more informed, to ask questions as we continue to press forward, as cyber becomes more and more important in the things of which we do. I think that is the appropriate place for that to be done.
Do you think there's a necessary expertise? It's an extraordinarily complex issue. Is there a necessary expertise?
Expertise for what? To examine what the government did and to take testimony and to make recommendations?
It's a very technical thing.
I think there is plenty of expertise because people can always call persons to ask, to speak about this, to review matters which may have been done, and to go ahead and make recommendations towards the parliament if there's any particular changes.
So they'll be able to call people, as it were, to testify.
I think that's what most committees have the opportunity to do. Committees and rules under committees are established under the Parliament Act, and you can take a read of the Parliament Act to see what powers committees would
I
have.
didn't really have a chance before I came here, so I just, for the public's sake, to work out.
But that's then with legislative committees.
The OBA in its press conference on Friday said that it'll become a political football because it'll be dominated by PLP MPs and senators. What's your take on that?
My take is that the Parliament is the appropriate space for legislators to understand the issues and to make recommendations to the executive, because that is the way that governments function. And in a parliamentary democracy, that is the space. There have been many inquiries that have been done in many particular parliaments around the world on many different things, and I do not feel the reason why the Bermuda's legislature should be any different.
Will it be open to press and public?
That would be up for the decision of the parliament. Remember, I'm the executive.
Of the chair.
We can only put forward the items. Those are matters that when the resolution comes forward with the speaker, et cetera.
Do you think
And
it
so
should be-
there are specific provisions inside of the Parliament Act for when things are done in public or when things are done in secret.
Given that it was such a huge issue, do you think personally that it should be open to press and public?
I think that there may be times where it should be open to press and public, sometimes it may be in camera. Those are the things that the Public Accounts Committee engages in as well. So I'm not going to prejudge what may or may not happen in the legislative process because it is not for me to dictate. What I believe is that the most appropriate place for this to happen is via the legislature, and those are the matters of which we will put forward.
In the throne speech in 2021, the government said it would introduce a Cybersecurity Act, which, amongst other things, would look at government data. In the throne speech of 2023, you're talking about the cybersecurity bill and amending it. Why are we waiting so long for this cybersecurity legislation to come into being?
Well, as you would note, legislation is not necessarily always simple. Legislation is complex. You will also note that the government passes a significant amount of legislation every year. Sometimes legislation may be more complex. Sometimes legislation may be more urgent, such as legislation that is required to meet international commitments. I think what the throne speech said is that the draft of the cybersecurity bill is going to be updated to reflect the latest items and will be brought forward before the legislature. I do know that a draft of that bill has been completed and it is expected to be tabled in the near future. I think that the date for the tabling for that bill is actually set for November 24th, but we'll see if it'll be the 24th or in December, but I'm expecting it shortly.
In the throne speech this year, it talked about the strengthening that was required. What strengthening is required as regards cybersecurity?
To the bill itself?
Yeah, the throne speech said.
I remember the point. I'm talking about the bill.
But you talked about the strengthening.
I can answer your question if you let me. So in that particular passage, it was speaking about the strengthening which may be required for the draft bill in the wake of what we've just experienced. And I think that the Minister of National Security, who does have the specific responsibility for cybersecurity, were able to address that question directly inside of his throne speech. As a reminder, for all persons who may know, the throne speech is made up of legislative submissions from various ministers who can speak very broadly in detail to the individual matters of which their departments or ministries have placed into the throne speech.
So we have to wait to ask the minister.
On that particular question, that is a specific question. I've answered quite a few questions around that because I can speak on broad measures, but on that one specifically.
I've got a lot more here. I've got a lot. Can I just finish on cybersecurity because I've got other issues as well? There's a lot in the throne speech to discuss.
But then we also have other ones, you come back to you.
Just to finish on cybersecurity. At the last press conference you held on this issue, you said there were circumstances to suggest that personal data might have been accessed. Do you have an update on that?
I don't have an update at this time, outside of the fact that I know that the statements which I made at that time are the same ones which maintained. There has not been any forensic evidence that has been discovered of exfiltration. However, the government's offices, I think the privacy office of the government has been working with the IDT teams to make sure that if there's any notifications that need to be sent, those matters will be shared.
Is everything back to normal?
Back to normal would be a subjective term. I would say that most core systems are up. There still continue to be challenges insofar as service delivery and isolated matters. I think what's also important to note is that regular IT challenges do happen as well. And so those things also have to be tackled with the work that the government teams are going through insofar as restoration of services more broadly. There's the making sure we get our systems and servers up and running, and then there's making sure that we can deliver the services that are necessary and required that are using those systems. So for the most part, things are up, but there are still challenges, but we continue to update the public via the government website at gov.bm, which has the listing of services.
Was it a ransomware attack?
Pardon me?
Was it a ransomware attack?
Again, the specifics of what we have experienced are not going to be matters that are going to discuss the press, the same answer which I've given on numerous occasions.
It's worth asking.
No problem, Jeremy.
We'll come back, hopefully. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Prime. And first of all, actually returning to what you said about that, some papers in front of me. You opened by talking about the making financial inclusivity, making everyone having access to banking services. So, what's the data behind this? How many are without banking services, and what are the kind of categories of people that are perhaps not getting the service that you believe they should be getting?
So that is a great question. I don't have that number off the top of my head. What I was actually surprised to find out is that when Bermuda started its fintech journey, for example, lots of jurisdictions spoke about fintech as a way to reach the unbanked. And I remember my statements early on in the days of this was that, in Bermuda, we don't have a very large unbanked population. That actually is not true. The unbanked population has actually been surprising for me to find out as Minister of Finance. Now, these can come down to a number of things that are dealing with AML issues, other types of issues. But what is key is that in this jurisdiction, just as in other jurisdictions, there is not that basic need for the protection for the basic banking services. And so, as we stated, if someone does not have access to the banking account, their ability to travel is clearly limited. Their ability to interact with the online world is clearly limited. Other jurisdictions have recognized that this particular challenge exists. This is something that had came up to me through members of our caucus while they were canvassing, persons talking about their difficulty of getting access to banking services. So there's a number of complexities around there regarding safe harbor provisions, et cetera, that needs to be inserted inside of legislation. But these are no different that have been done in other jurisdictions. But on your specific question, I don't have that information with me. I know, I'm not going to give you the ballpark, but I do know that that information will be able to be found because I know there was a matter of a discussion. So I'll see what information we provided to you specifically. I don't have it off the top of my head. What I can say is that I was surprised at how big of an issue it was in Bermuda because I did not actually believe that was a large issue.
So you referred to other jurisdictions that do have some kind of legislation in place which allows more people to have access. So what do we not have here that is happening overseas?
Safe harbor provisions to protect banks against any particular challenges which may come up under the mandate to provide basic banking services.
Right, and that's what you're looking to put in.
I think a jurisdiction that you referred to recently in change this area would be the United Kingdom.
Okay. I'll come back to that in a moment. I did want to touch on the proposal around, you speak about immigration and growing the working population, but also the proposal to create benefits for companies to keep able-bodied staff on beyond 65. Now, again, the data behind that, what kind of numbers do you have? Do you know how many you may be able to keep in the workforce because of that, and what sort of cost savings in terms of pension payouts, etc., are you looking at?
Well, I'm sure that there's statistical and publicly available census data that can give you the amounts of persons who are in particular age categories on that level. But let me tackle a particular point of your question because I do watch your news broadcasts from time to time and notice what I would call the repetition of a particular phase, working population. And I think that it's important because that needs to be put into context because there's so much focus on the working population without what is necessary and required to increase the working population. What is required to increase the working population is jobs. So when we are talking about the increase of the working population, we are talking about the expansion of the economy, the creation of additional jobs and economic activity that can be filled by persons here, because increase of the working population is if there are people that are living in Bermuda who are Bermudian, who are not working, those persons will be working. And so I think it's important we focus there, because a lot of the focus on the working population you report is in regards to importation of labor versus the fact that the key condition to increase the working population is to make sure there are jobs in Bermuda for persons to have. So that is a particular distinction that I wanted to make sure to make. And it's one that I hope that you would certainly share with those persons who enjoy watching the matters on your particular program. And that is why the government has been so focused on its economic recovery plan, and also matters related to the economic development strategy around making sure that we increase the number of jobs in the economy, make sure that we have the ability for that work to, that increase to continue in all aspects, whether that be construction, whether it be hospitality, whether it be international business on the domestic side. And so I think that it's an important point to note there.
And we have covered that, but it has to be acknowledged that the 8,000, 8,500 that was touted in the last year in the policy paper on aging population, that whole number is not going to be comfortable. It's going to be a mix of those.
I understand. I understand completely, not even trying to debate. I just wanted to make that point for those persons who are watching, and also for yourself, because there's always this discussion without recognizing that the precondition for the increase of a working population is increase in jobs for persons to work in. And that is the focus of the government, to increase the economic pie. Those other items, if you have jobs and you need labor for jobs, then yes, that labor will come locally or internationally, but it's important to focus. So when the Chamber of Commerce is talking about the fact that they do not have the staff, that means that the economy is growing and there is an increase of jobs available for people to fill. Those are the points which I think are often overlooked in the discussions around these issues.
But also, referring to what Chamber of Commerce CEO Danielle Riviere said, there are jobs that they're not finding the people to fill them here. And going to your, you made reference to the economic development strategy, and obviously, and that's what was in the throne speeches. We're going to enact some of these things to help increase the population that will be impacting immigration. I wondered, obviously, this is Minister Jason Hayward's territory, but
Absolutely.
I'm sure the conversations have been had. We've got several action items on here. Can you tell us?
What I will not do is preclude the Minister of Economy and Labor's press conference, because he will be having his own individual press conference to speak on this. But what I can say more broadly on matters related to issues surrounding immigration, as you had stated, one of the things which we highlighted in our theme of making sure that we continue to serve the people and serve the people better is around the streamlining, not only of those processes, but also, key point, because I know a number of them are on that particular page there, exactly, but also a key point of making sure that we provide better services to the public. And this is not a slight on public officers, because public officers have had to deal with many, many years of austerity. Most government departments are under strength, and the difficulty and also with increasing external requirements, for instance, on passport matters, where the UK continues to add additional requirements for processing, additional requirements for vetting, etc. Those are things which are challenged. But we know that there are persons who will say they will call the Department of Immigration, can't get through. We know there's persons who will say they will contact various government departments, can't get responses. And so what we want to make sure that is known and understood from this particular throne speech is that the government understands those particular complaints and challenges that are being experienced by those persons who are using government services, and is committed to putting the resources in place to focus on the increase of the efficiency and better service provision in those key touch point areas. So a lot of people will like to say, oh, well, this, you know, there's not a whole lot of new legislative items that are inside of this throne speech. But the fact is, we've passed a significant amount of legislation over the past 3 years. Passing legislation, it is only effective and helpful for the people of this country if we can effectively implement the legislation of which we pass and focus on that implementation. And so there will be less broader, larger new policy initiatives and more focused by ministers on the work of ensuring that government departments are implementing existing changes and ensuring that those work better for the taxpayers. And so that is a key point of this particular throne speech that I want to make sure is understood.
Okay, and responding to what you're saying there, a bit more about the enacting and the policies around the legislation you've already made. Can you at least tell us, do you think these action items that we see in the strategy, are they going to require new legislation, or is the legislation in place for these things like automating work permit applications, lowering the eligibility requirements for individuals to be obtain permanent residency, review restricted job categories? There's no legislation.
Some things require legislation, some things do not. I think the throne speech is very clear on the things where it says we'll make amendments to X, Y, and Z. Those are things that require legislation. What I'm speaking of is more broadly insofar as the theme of the throne speech. We know the items of which we have been engaged in. Those matters that are related to healthcare reform, matters that are related to education reform, the various bills that are needed to support that along the way. But I also wanted to be made clear to your listeners and those that are watching is that the government is acutely aware of the fact that we need to improve service delivery in a number of areas. And that will be a co-equal focus of ministers of the government this year, not only in advancing broad and large legislative packages of fundamental change, whether it's immigration reform, whether it is minimum wage, whether it's those matters, but also focusing on matters related to implementation and making sure that the customer experience is better for taxpayers.
Okay. Now, you made point yourself, you want to increase the number of jobs. Whether it's going to be Bermudians taking those jobs, whether these are going to be jobs that may require people from overseas. But our progress to this position that we're in, it's not new. And obviously there's been very positive reaction from some fronts to the idea of people not having or them being encouraged, their businesses being encouraged to keep people beyond retirement age. Some people want to. But it's in the context of this growing our working population, which according to your government is necessary within a short space of time, or everybody's taxes will go up. None of this is new. Our aging population, our shrinking population, the reduction of jobs, none of this is new. Is the fact that you're having to make throne speech promises about encouraging people not to retire an indictment of your party's management of the economy for the majority of the last 30 years?
Well, what I would say is that that would be a false answer and a false question entirely. The fact is that there are persons who are over the age of 65 who may wish to continue working. Remember, when the age of 65 came in, the life expectancy in the country was less than 65. The life expectancy in the country is far greater. These are changes. I do not believe that the two are related. This is a government that is responsive to matters of which we hear when we canvass, when we interact with persons. And the fact is that although there is no legislated retirement age in Bermuda, there is legislative retirement age to the public service, which has been advanced, but there is no broader legislative retirement age in Bermuda. However, many persons do get forced, in some instances, to retire at the age of 65. What has been stated in the throne speech is to look at incentives for businesses who may want to retain people after that fact. And so that is what the government will be looking to promote. We are being responsive. Serving the people means that you listen to the concerns of which they have raised. There are a number of persons who raised the concern of saying, you know, I'm not ready to stop working. There are plenty of persons. I mean, come on, look, we have people that are running countries who are well over the age of 65. They're able to continue to do the work. And so this is where this is all about. So I don't think to equate one to the economy or the other, I don't think that's fair. I think what we are speaking about is being responsive to things which have been raised, making sure we analyze those and saying that we believe this is something that is helpful, something that we believe on a more broad measure would be helpful for persons inside the economy, and that's why we're advancing it.
And then you talked about being responsive, but have previous PLP governments not been responsive to that which was coming ahead? The aging population, the reduction of jobs, were they not responsive to that?
But here's
where we are now.
But see, this is where you've got it wrong, because you keep going to reduction of jobs, which flies in the face of the economic statistics. It flies in the face. We had an increase of jobs prior to the pandemic. Jobs fell in the pandemic just like they did everywhere else. Jobs are recovering and they are growing. So for you to say the reduction of jobs, that would not be correct. And so that's why I'm saying that we have to match the rhetoric and the questions with the facts. And the facts are that the number of jobs in our economy is expanding and is continuing to expand. And that is due to the work of the government executing an economic recovery plan and now advancing an economic development strategy to continue to create the conditions for there to be additional private sector job creation in Bermuda.
Gary, mindful of time.
Yes, and
Last question, and we'll
I
do-
want Chairman to have a
Right.
chance. So
Yeah.
then, just a very broad
Mhm.
question on what initiatives in this throne speech do you think will have the greatest impact on growing the economy?
On growing the economy, I think that streamlining of planning would be helpful. I think that streamlining of matters that are related to additional immigration matters would be helpful. I think that the making easier for persons to access matters related to the Tourism Investment Act, I think will be helpful insofar as matters related to economic growth. But I think what also has to be stated, and I think on a broad measure, measures that are related to healthcare reform. I mean, healthcare expenses are a huge part of businesses' inability to retain more workers. And I think that as we continue to advance the layout of the core package for the universal healthcare, which has been matters that are related to design, that has been targeted for this particular parliamentary year, I think are all things that are broad-based to help and to assist. But I think it's important to note that it is not the government's role to create jobs. It is the government's role to create the conditions in the private sector so the private sector can go ahead and create jobs and support them. So where it is the items that I just mentioned, I think those will all be helpful in the provision of additional private sector investment that can go ahead and create additional jobs in the economy.
Okay, thank you very much, Gary. Trevor, one last question, and Jeremy will shift you.
Premier,
One last question, we're mindful of the time.
Premier, I'm not too sure if anything was mentioned in the throne speech about tackling the economy.
That's a little bit much. I won't lean on that anymore.
Tackling the economy, the cost of living here in Bermuda. I'm not sure if there's anything mentioned. How are you going to tackle that issue, the cost of living? And you talked about seniors just now. A lot of seniors can't afford to retire because of the cost of living.
So thank you for that, because cost of living has been one of the, I would say, the biggest political issue in Bermuda for 25 years. Let's be clear on that one. That is something that has not receded. And as long as I've been in politics, that has always been one of the #1 concerns of residents. I don't believe it's correct to say the throne speech was silent on that, because #1, we spoke about the things of which we have done in order to shield Bermudians from the impact of 40-year high global inflation, whether that's capping the fuel price, whether that's elimination of duty on staple goods, whether it's the work of which we've done to boost assistance for those persons who may be in those particular spaces like financial assistance, childcare, et cetera, in aiming to help to assist. What the throne speech did speak about, that the Cost of Living Commission will be identifying additional items to add to that staple goods list. So those matters can be subjected to duty relief as well and duty elimination, which should help to eliminate pricing pressures there. The work that is being done by the minister responsible for energy in regards to the changes of the Electricity Act, the Electronic Communications Act, matters that are related to services that are consumed and making sure that price decisions there represent the interest of the consumer. So I don't believe it's accurate to say that there is not any mention, but the real fact is, as has been stated on numerous occasions, that we will not make a significant dent in Bermuda's structure of cost of living without significant tax reform. And what has been mentioned inside the throne speech is the fact that the Tax Reform Commission, which will be announced, all members will be announced in the House of Assembly on November 10th, whose work is to make sure that they go through the review of the implementation of the global minimum tax and to make suggestions to the revision, the reduction, or elimination of existing taxes and customs duties. And if you look at how cost pressures are in Bermuda, those come from employer payroll tax, which used to be called employment tax or hospital levy or whatever you want to call it in Bermuda, or customs duty, which of course make everything that comes in more expensive. And that of course makes more things that come after those particular things more expensive. Do I want to read a crystal ball into the future of what that may look like? I can't, because we have a tax reform commission who is going to be given a mandate to make the examinations around this. But the goal of which they're going to be given is to keep Bermuda competitive. And the way to keep Bermuda competitive economically, the way to keep Bermuda competitive residentially for persons who want to remain in Bermuda, persons who want to come back to Bermuda, is to fix this particular challenge of cost of living. And that can only happen through significant changes to tax reform. In Bermuda, just about every single tax that we have is inflationary. So if you tax employers who are providing services, that means that they have to charge you more for those services in order to deliver those services. If you tax everything that comes into the country, that means that everything that the person who's providing that service or the person who is selling that particular good for you, it makes it more expensive. That's the type of focus of which needs to happen. And I'm pleased that we have an amazing tax reform commission that will be examining that particular work and revert back to the government on those recommendations, which will not factor into this next year's budget, but will factor into the budget for the following year.
Jeremy, last one. Yeah.
Last one.
Yeah. Michael,
Where do I start?
another-
But I've got so many questions. It's a shame just to have one. I'll carry on from Trevor's on the global minimum tax. I've got several questions, so bear with me. How confident are you that this global minimum tax will actually come into effect worldwide, not just Bermuda?
I mean, I can only go from the statements that have been made in international fora that they're expecting that the global minimum tax will be effective from the 1st of January 2025. I cannot go from any other way statements from that. I mean, that's the conversations, discussions. Those are all the soundings of which we've heard, and we have not been in the Ministry of Finance been made to indicate anything different at this time. So that's the perspective where we are pushing ahead with, and there's been amazing consultation that has happened with the international business community. The International Tax Working Group has done a stellar job in navigating some particularly difficult issues. We've issued 2 consultation papers, had significant response from them. The Ministry of Finance is engaged in one-on-one meetings with major employers in the country to discuss concerns, challenges, making sure that we understand to address any individual concerns, particular concerns. This is going to be a very large change for Bermuda. There is no doubt about it, but I think that it is full credit to the work that we've done to date in managing this fundamental change. This is an absolutely massive change. And what you've seen is just a history of this government consulting, working through incredibly difficult and complex issues in a way without rancor to arrive at a solution which is best for the country. And so we will expect to be tabling a corporate income tax bill in this parliamentary session. We expect to follow those up next year by additional changes prior to the implementation date of the 1st of January 2025. And we're going to continue to look forward to the work of the Tax Reform Commission, who is going to get an analysis of what may come, and what may be, what revenue may be derived, and how to make sure that we offset that revenue with the understanding that the government's view, and I think it is matched by the public's view, that the #1 challenge is the cost of living and cost of doing business in Bermuda. And if the global minimum tax can reduce the cost of living and cost of doing business in Bermuda, that means that the economy will be more competitive, which will lead to additional growth.
Okay, so there's quite a few follow-up questions there. First of all, you mentioned the revenue. Have you any idea how much revenue could be created by this for government?
We certainly do, and that information we provided to the Tax Reform Commission. I'm not going to start prognosticating here because we need to make sure that we finalize all the various items of the corporate income tax bill first before we start talking about what may or may not come.
So how much of that revenue, you know how much it is, what percentage do you think will be used to lower taxes?
So I will give you a broad policy statement, and I will give you what I've said to everyone else who's asked this question in regards to the Tax Reform Commission. I'm not going to prejudge the work and recommendations of the Tax Reform Commission. The Tax Reform Commission has been impaneled to examine all these matters and make recommendations to the government of Bermuda. And so that is the information the Tax Reform Commission will recommend to the government of Bermuda.
Right.
And so I'm not going to get in that. But the broader statement of which I have made is that the government does not view the creation of a global revenue tax of being an overall measure to increase the government's revenue. What we want to do is to make sure that we can offset those with reductions in taxes that increase the cost of living and cost of doing business.
That's why
The
I
Tax
asked the
Reform Commission
percentage.
will examine, the Tax Reform Commission will make recommendations. Those recommendations will be public and we'll be happy to discuss it at this time. But what I want to do is, rather than to focus on what may happen in the future, I can answer the question, what I know right now.
I mean, understood. There is a problem with this, in that the companies affected by this don't always make huge profits. They often make huge losses. Have you factored that into your calculations?
So just a note, Jeremy, I actually find the question offensive, because the thought that the Ministry of Finance that has guided Bermuda through multiple things does not factor into the view that revenue will change, something I've mentioned on numerous occasions. I actually find it offensive. It comes from the perspective of the assumption over at Royal Gazette headquarters that the government doesn't know what it's doing. We can't manage finances. So of course we've taken that into account. And of course the Tax Reform Commission is going to take that into account. Yes, that is what we are doing. We are dealing with a massive change of taxes. And in that massive change of taxes of which we are dealing with, all of those factors have been taken into account. So when there are people from the One Bermuda Alliance who sit on the Tax Reform Commission putting out nonsense statements about, is the government taking this into account, is the government taking this into account, is the government taking this into account, and the Royal Gazette then parrots the exact same things which they're saying, I actually find it offensive. Because of course we've taken into account. This is the work. There is a body of professionals. There is international tax professionals from some of the biggest companies on the planet who are working with the government on this. And all of those measures have absolutely been taken into account. And we expect that the Tax Reform Commission will take them into account. Can I go to your question, please?
Jeremy, exhausted your question. One last question. Last question, Gary, and then we're wrapping up.
Last question is one of the criticisms levied at some of our data coming, such as inflation, economy, and the labour surveys, that some of the data is old. So I know another census isn't due for a few years, but the housing expenditure survey, are we getting one too?
The fact is that was budgeted. I think the minister has said those matters are progressing, so he can answer that more directly, as the Minister of Economy and Labor is responsible for the Department of Statistics. During his press conference, he can answer that better. But I'll allow you one more question that relies with things under my particular remit, as Jeremy did get 3 if he was supposed to get 1, so I don't want to be unfair.
Final question, Gary.
It's fine. I'm not taking any offence here whatsoever. Cost of Living Commission is going to identify more essential items that will be duty-free. Can you specify any of the items that are under consideration?
No, I cannot. That's for the Tax Reform Commission, and we have a very good commission that can look at those items. I have
no data coming in.
Those are not things that I can speak to directly, because I'm not responsible for the Tax Reform Commission. As I've said, throne speeches are put together by submissions from various ministers, also by feedback from our parliamentary colleagues, to make sure that we come up with a cohesive body of work for a full parliamentary session that deals with all matters of the Ministry of Government. On that specific question, I'm unable to provide an answer, as that is not an area inside of my specific responsibility. What I can say is that that is what the Tax Reform Commission, not the Tax Reform, the Cost of Living Commission will be charged with this year. They will revert those matters to the Ministry of Finance. We will consider review and move forward.
Okay, Premier, any last words as we wind down and wrap up today's press conference?
No, I think it was a rather robust set of questions, and I look forward to persons questioning the various ministers over the next few weeks, as they all host their individual press conferences. And I do want to close by saying I want to thank all of our public officers for their continued work under very difficult circumstances. And I want to remind that when we speak about improving service delivery in government, this is not about criticizing public officers who in many cases are going above and beyond. What we need to make sure we focus on is to make our processes more responsive, to increase the level of customer service that is provided to the people of Bermuda. That is the theme of service to the people, and that is what this government is committed to do, and its ministers are committing to do in this parliamentary year. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and tune into Parliament on Friday, where there'll be the throne speech reply and also the general debate. Thank you.